man is staking out a hotel in Paris. He's an assassin for hire called the Killer. He describes his work in detail, saying one cannot survive the boredom that comes with it. He knows that his actions can't affect the world's metrics, as almost 4 people are born every second while 2 die simultaneously. He also understands the world is governed by a few who oppress the majority and is glad to be one of these few. He doesn't define his work by loyalty to a country, but by what he is paid. He feels he's an excellent assassin due to his lack of empathy, trust in no one, and sticking to the battle he can win. During his stakeout, the Killer listens to music by the Smiths, does yoga, and sleeps while bleaching everything he touches. His mission is to execute a wealthy citizen, and he's fully prepared for the task ahead. However, it's been 5 days, so the Killer calls his contractor Hodges, saying that if the target doesn't show up in the next 24 hours, he will pack up and leave. The Killer is staying at a vacant apartment undergoing renovations. After setting up his gun, the Killer hears the door chime and unlock as someone walks to the main door. The Killer lies in ambush, but the stranger turns out to be a delivery guy who opens the door and drops some mail before leaving. That night, the target shows up with a dominatrix. The Killer prepares to assassinate him, recounting the most basic rules for his work's success. The Killer locks the target into his aim, but sadly the dominatrix steps into it, causing her to take the fatal shot. The Killer is devastated to miss his target, but he doesn't have time to dilly-dally. He packs up and exits the building, ensuring to evade police cars and discarding his items in various trash sites all over the city. He gets to the airport and boards a flight to the United States. On the plane, he sees a man wearing expensive dress shoes. He calls Hodges and reports the mission's failure. Hodges asks him to lay low for a while to avoid blowback. The Killer also spots the man at the airport lobby and suspects being followed. Consequently, he cancels his next flight, opting for the following morning. He's a man of caution who rarely engages with people unless absolutely necessary. The Killer's second destination is the Dominican Republic, where he has a safe house. He retrieves his car and drives to an isolated house in the woods. However, he finds several blueprints and cigarette butts on the mud near the gate and suspects something to be wrong. He pulls out his gun and rushes into the house, finding it chaotic with blood staining the walls. He calls someone and then drives to the hospital. He learns that 2 assassins had assaulted his girlfriend Magdala. Magdala's brother Marcus knows the assassins wanted the Killer, and he's sad that his sister got hurt. The Killer promises Marcus that such an incident will never happen again. Magdala wakes up and says she stayed strong and never gave up information regarding the Killer. She says the assassins were a man and a woman. She stabbed the man in the leg and escaped into the woods, staying hidden until the assassins left in a taxi car. The Killer arranges for Magdala to be taken to a private hospital. The Killer learns the assassins have been driven to the company by a green taxi. He returns to the house and retrieves his weapons and numerous passports from an underground safe. He seeks out the taxi service, tricking the clerk into letting him in. He ties up the clerk and gets the information he needs, leaving the office rummaged to hide his intention and pass it like a petty theft. Then he gets into the green cab driven by Leo. The Killer removes his weapon and asks Leo about the assassins. Leo explains he had picked them up from a private airport and driven them to a remote location. He didn't want to, but the assassins gave him no choice and they aided heftily. They had the address and he used Google Maps to access it. They had him wait for almost an hour, and when they got back, the man was bleeding profusely on his leg. Leo drove them back to the airport. After getting the information, the Killer executes Leo and takes the car's radio, making it seem like a robbery gone wrong. The Killer travels to New Orleans. He stakes out an old building with analog security systems. He's there to get to Hodges, an attorney. The Killer was a law student when Hodges approached him, convinced him to drop out and start breaking the law instead. Hodges trusts analog processes, so breaking into his office will take a lot of work. Luckily, the Killer gains entry into the building by tailing after a FedEx employee disguising himself as a sanitarian. He sneaks into Hodges' office and holds him and his personal assistant Dolores hostage. He has Dolores zip-tie Hodges to his chair and herself in the bathroom. The Killer is meticulous in his work, ensuring he destroys any electric device that can be used to call for help. He's deduced that Hodges had sent the assassins to his house. Hodges explains that he had to send assassins to the Killer's hideout after the failed mission, as the client wanted to tie up loose ends. He wants the Killer to disappear as he has enough money to live a quiet, lavish life. He punctures Hodges' lungs with a nail gun, demanding he share the information so he can call the emergency services. However, Hodges refuses to confess and dies earlier than the Killer anticipated. Nonetheless, the killer packs up the body in his garbage bin. The killer approaches Dolores, who knows she will die, but she doesn't want to disappear. She asks the killer for mercy. She can help him get the information he needs, and in return, he has to eliminate her and make it seem like an accident so that her children can get her estate with the life insurance. The killer agrees to the terms and learns the location of one of the assassins. He then kills Dolores by breaking her neck, making it seem like she had an accidental fatal fall. The killer chops up Hodges' body and disposes of some of it in the ocean and buries the rest. The killer travels to Florida and stakes out the assassin's house, confirming his identity when he sees him walk with a limp. He drugs the assassin's pit bull and sneaks into the house. However, the assassin ambushes him and a fierce fight ensues. The assassin is bulkier and his punches are severe, but the killer puts up a good fight. He retrieves his gun and eliminates the assassin. The noise wakes the dog, causing the killer to flee the house. Once he's outside the house, he throws a Molotov cocktail into the house and leaves it burning. The killer's next stop is Beacon, New York. He spots the second assassin and tails her car. Throughout his travels, the killer has been using different passports, renting other vehicles, and ensuring a low profile. The killer sees the assassin at a stop sign and hesitates as she's elderly. The woman realizes that doom is near and explains that the job requires one to put all emotions aside. The woman eats and drinks while asking the killer what his motivations are in eliminating her. She mentions she never intended to harm Magdala, but the other assassin couldn't be reasoned with. After the meal, the killer walks the assassin to where he will execute her. She slips on a staircase and asks the killer to help her up. Sadly, the killer eliminates her with a shot to the head and then says, "Trust no one." The final journey is to Chicago, where the client resides. Dealing with the client might be risky, seeing that police officers often descend hard on crimes committed by wealthy people. He transfers his money into a Caribbean account and then tracks the client, Claiborne, a billionaire venture capitalist. The killer locates Claiborne in a private gym and signs up for a week's trial to gain access. The killer purchases a gun from a dealer and orders several tools on Amazon. He sneaks into Claiborne's locker at the gym and copies his apartment's keycard. Claiborne is on the phone when he turns around and sees the killer pointing a gun at him. Claiborne doesn't recognize him until the killer places a card on the table. Still, Claiborne is unaware, but soon registers who the stranger is. The killer asks if the client has a problem with him. The client explains that after the failed mission, Hodges suggested that the client should come up with a backup plan. Since he was new at this, the client paid for the services and never thought he would deal with the matter again. The killer spares Claiborne, promising to return and finish the work should he feel threatened. He gives Claiborne different scenarios in which a murder can pass off as an accidental death. The killer is disappointed to learn that Hodges had double-crossed him and pinned the blame on the client. Before leaving, he's genuinely curious about the client's naivety. The killer returns to the Dominican Republic where Magdala is recovering. He voices that maybe he isn't one of the few as he thought he was after all. Do leave a comment telling us your favorite part of the movie. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next recap. Until next time folks, take care and goodbye.